Brought to you by Accenture Extended Reality. This is Field of View.
Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Kolayani from the Academy of International Extended Reality.
And hello, my name is Nick Rosa from Accenture, and this is Field of View, the podcast where we interview interesting people from the XR business, and every other week we release a new episode, and the episodes are available for you to see, download from YouTube, from Spotify, and from Apple Music.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the reason we put together this podcast was to delve deeper into, what makes an XR pioneer, what's the origin story behind someone who gets involved, and also to discuss just really cool, exciting things to do with both virtual reality and augmented reality. And Nick, we've got a really interesting episode again, kind of this week, right?
Yeah, we are going to explore something that we've been doing in Accenture on a very exciting platform that is becoming even more exciting, on a company that in the last probably 5 to 6 years has become probably one of the most innovative companies in the world, thanks to their new CEO and thanks to a wave of fantastic product and acquisition that they've been doing, plus embracing completely all the world of mixed reality. In fact, we're going to talk about Microsoft, and we're going to talk about Katie Kelly, which is the principal product manager at Microsoft, and she's also the product owner at AltspaceVR. Hi, Katie. Nice to meet you, and thank you for being here.
It is a pleasure to meet both of you. Thank you for having me.
Well, Nick, we've got some really we've got lots of questions I guess we want to ask on this one, because Katie, I mean, you were with AltspaceVR before the acquisition with Microsoft as well, right?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, especially if anybody's been involved in VR for the last couple of years, but ours specifically. I was part of AltspaceVR for the last 5 years. We were acquired about 3 years ago from Microsoft. And then ever since kind of being part of Microsoft and also trying to solve the problem of collaboration and people in VR meeting and going to all these events, it's just been a crazy ride.
No, that's awesome.
And we've been doing a lot of interesting stuff recently that we're going to talk about later. We're going to see some clips, we're going to see some photos, and you're going to talk about the collaboration that we've been having with Accenture. But why don't we start from the beginning? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what you studied and what took you to work in XR? We like to deep dive into the origin story of all of our guests. So why don't you start with that?
And I think that's the best part of the mixed reality universe. People come to it from all different backgrounds. It hasn't been decided yet how this world is going to work yet. So it's given a lot of opportunities for people from untraditional backgrounds to play a part. And that's definitely my story too. I grew up in a small town in Oregon, and I always wanted to live in the big city and work in film. So I moved to New York with knowing nobody. And I worked in advertising because it's the closest thing I could get to being on set and telling stories. So I worked for on different commercials like Hershey's and Pepto-Bismol, Crest. I always joke that I gave people cavities and then I tried to take them away. And through that discovery, I started getting into marketing for startups. I moved to Silicon Valley, and I worked for a variety of smaller startups, finally ending up at a nonprofit tech company called Medic Mobile. It was a fascinating company. We traveled around the world trying to solve global health problems. And that journey took me to a tent at a conference in New York called The Future of Storytelling. If any of you have ever heard of it or had the chance to go, I highly recommend it. It's the world's leading innovators around storytelling, marketing, and film. And they had a VR tent. And I'd always heard about virtual reality. I remember seeing it on stage when I was maybe 12 years old at a kind of science fair in Oregon, but I never got to try it. So I always just imagined what it would be. So I walk into this VR tent, a guy puts a headset on me, and all of a sudden, as the world fades away, I'm a linebacker running down a field. My muscles are bulging. I have this football. I get to the finish line, and the crowd goes wild. And I remember taking off my headset and looking around and going, this is the future of everything, of communication, of storytelling. And that thing that happens to us when you really experience that thing that lights you up, that's what happened to me. And the other part was I found there was one woman in the tent who was premiering a different VR app. And I asked her how many women were in this space. And she said, I could count them on my hand. And I remember thinking that I really wanted this next stage of kind of innovation, storytelling, connection to make sure that I had a bunch of diverse voices playing a part in it. And selfishly, I wanted to be one of those. So I started looking around, and there were a couple VR companies that were out and about, and I stumbled onto AltspaceVR. And at the time, it was just an empty room with a concept. It was before the Gear VR came out, or the Oculus Rift, or the HTC Vive. So it was all just an idea, a room, and the hope of filling it with people. And so I joined that company, and 2 months later, they premiered on Gear VR, and then 2 weeks later was Vive and Rift. It was just like the promised land month of VR for consumer adoption. And I'm wandering around. I'm their marketing manager, and I'm wandering around as a camera avatar and meeting strangers from all over the world and hearing their stories. And just capturing that, making eye contact with the customer I was supposed to market to, created such again, this world is kind of the next stage of so many things, and also the next stage, I think, of marketing and storytelling, because you're making eye contact and asking customers what do they want. And so I became kind of the hopefully forgivable thorn in the side of all of my engineers at the time, because I was the one constantly going, hey, have we tried this? Have we thought about moderation? Have we tackled this? And so when we got acquired by Microsoft, they really wanted to put the voice of the community, and also I just had the most, I think, background and passion about the product. And so I was able to eventually lead our engineers, our artists, our PMs. I now lead a studio of a tech company at Microsoft. And we're trying to solve some of the hardest problems of collaboration in VR, but it's all done from a community and storytelling lens, which I think is what got so exciting when we talked to Accenture, because through this journey, talking to innovative companies that are also excited about breaking into that market in a new, innovative way. And so many people at Accenture are storytellers, that all of that journey from kind of a non-traditional background to now, I think, has created a really ripe experience of trying to tackle what collaboration, virtual reality, the meaning of presence means for collaboration and entertainment, and also for enterprise and all the amazing things that Accenture does.
That's awesome. So, I mean, talk us through it. So you go from a job in a industry completely outside of XR, I mean focusing on marketing and also background in copywriting and all these areas. And then now you find yourself at a VR company, essentially. What's the difference like? I mean, how do you adjust to something like that? What's the process for, I guess, jumping from one space to another like that?
The most interesting thing, I think, for my journey is, if you told me 10 years ago that this is what I would be doing, I would be like, okay, how did that happen? But I think that the biggest thing when I talk to other people that are interested in getting in this space, or even just following a career path that they love, it's that ignition, or that igniting of passion that I think happens. That despite what background you have, if you care enough about a thing, you're going to learn everything about it to make it successful. And so my background is yes, storytelling, marketing, film, and then my side passions, I think, also are drawn into this role, which is like, I go to Burning Man every year. I love festivals that bring people together. There's a summer camp for adults in California that I go to religiously every year. That is just, they have like a typewriter range, and they have yoga, and they have music all night. Like, I love those, the ability to bring communities together, to be able to just delight people. And that's also something that I think is intrinsic into at least why I do this. I want people, after they take off their VR headset or they log off our 2D version on PC and Mac, that they feel like their time was valuable. And I think that just comes from an intrinsic passion to try to do some good. And I know it can sound corny, but that's just like, if I'm going to spend most of my time in my day working on something, I want to care about it. So I think that's why the non-traditional background, it's like, it wasn't just what I cared about as a career. It was also accumulation of all of the passions that made me up, that made me good at what I do. And so that was really exciting too, that Microsoft recognized that. They were willing to give me that shot of putting somebody with my background in charge of a technology company. And so far, like, that feels really good. That feels like a melding of my superpowers. And so I'm hopeful that other people interested in getting in this, they can look at that and go, it's not about the thing that's on your resume, or it's not about the courses you took in college. It's about an accumulation of all of those things that like make you up, that make you care about what you do.
And I mean, this is fascinating because I keep saying that the true differentiator right now in the age of information, when knowledge is widely available everywhere on YouTube, 50% of YouTube searches are how-to videos. It's passion in something. If you bring that passion and you can ignite that spark of passion in the people that are around you, is also it's contagious. It's infectious, and you can really bring something special to the work that you're doing every day.
Exactly. The last point too, I was listening to one of Oprah's podcasts, and they were telling a story about how they asked a bunch of CEOs in a room to raise their hand if they went to school for engineering, or if like their background kind of lined up to the thing that they're doing. And like 2 out of 100 raised their hand. Like a lot of people that are in that room, especially people that I think lead companies, it's because of the passion. It's because of the empathy and excitement about trying to do something good that I think makes a bigger difference than necessarily what you have. Not to discount all the people that have worked their butts off to learn a thing, like that is also necessary. But it's nice to know that there's a place too for that whole richness of a person to be brought at a job.
But it seems to me that XR has a community that is extremely passionate about the technology. I mean, it's incredible. You talk to everybody at events and meetups, and you can clearly see this passion coming through. Do you think that this is the differentiator that is going to make the difference this time, respect from the first wave of XR that there was in the 80s?
Well, Nick, this is also interesting because like when we have like new team members join with AIXR that have come from other industries and other sectors, they always tell me like, wow, this industry is so different from what I'm used to. And everyone is quite a tight-knit community, but it's also everyone in here, especially right now. And I don't know if this is going to change. And I guess Katie, you can comment on that as well. But it's like everyone right now really has this burning passion, right, for this tech.
Well, you had to have it too, right? Because so much about VR has been a very slow kind of trickle. And I think that you needed that passion and that momentum to get to where we are now. And even now, people are like, okay, this is the time for VR. I feel like I want to step out of the conversation of is this the time for VR or not? Because I think that is just so dependent on so many different factors. But I at least want to be in the little chunk of the VR universe, or really we're hoping that AltsSpace becomes a platform that is accessible to everybody. So whether it's a 2D version and really nailing that feeling of presence, outside of like we're on video right now, like you feel far away. But if we were in a AltsSpace meetup or any sort of collaborative app, and we're there together, even if it's 2D, you still feel like there's a level of presence that you don't get otherwise. So I'm hopeful that we can independent of what happens in the platform market, which we know like Apple's going to enter this story. I'm sure Oculus and Facebook are going to be introducing amazing new headsets. Microsoft obviously has our stories too. So independent of that, I just want to create the best experience that then can onboard people, whether it's from 2D or from their VR headset, and then bring people along for the ride with whatever happens in the industry.
And you tackle something interesting in what you just said, which is making the platform accessible. Do you think that there's enough research right now when it comes to accessibility for XR?
I mean, absolutely not. I think that any new technology, the hardest part about making it accessible is that because it's so new, you're not building for everybody. You're building for a small number of people that you can learn, and that always means that you're skipping really important parts of it. One thing that I feel lucky about when it comes to AltSpace, because we are on some of the most accessible headsets, and we were on Daydream, we were on Samsung Gear VR, and we made those choices really consciously because people would come into AltSpace and say, hey, the fidelity is kind of low, or these avatars seem simple. That's because we would have 50 people in a space together experiencing content together. Nobody else was doing that, and it was on the most accessible platforms. So because we did that, we had a lot of very different people using our product, giving us feedback. It's still not enough. And I will be the first to say that AltSpace needs to do a lot of work to make sure that everybody can use our product. Because one thing too that I find interesting is that it's not just about making it accessible for everybody, but making it possible for us to experience the talent and creation of everybody. So if people can't use our product, they can't host events, they can't share themselves. And so then we're minimizing the impact of growing our community. And the last story I'll mention there is that we become a really good spot for specialized communities to come together when they couldn't normally. The LGBT community specifically, I hosted a meetup. It was like an LGBT meetup probably 3 or 4 years ago. And we had 400 people show up from South Africa, from Israel, from Turkey, everybody in a headset looking around, making eye contact with each other and telling their stories. And we heard from people there that said, I have never found this community. Like whether they lived in a really rural place in America or a place where they could be put in jail for marrying the person that they love, they were able to come together and form that community. And we've seen that across the board. We have VR churches on Sunday. We have Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, but we also have people that want to bring their community together. Performers, talent, people that feel like having a asynchronous Twitter connection with their fans isn't enough. They want to make eye contact with their community. And that's one reason that we focus so much on events as a container and kind of a gravitational pull to bring people together that are interested in a topic, a person, a performer, so that we can use that as a way of kind of growing a community from starting from like the maybe marginalized or just different kinds of people using the product.
And I had the pleasure of hosting some of the Ask Me Everything events for AIXR. We had the ILMX lab a couple of times and was super exciting. And at the end of those events, the most interesting thing about the event, the event itself was super interesting because, of course, you had people that were telling stories about how they made wonderful games about Star Wars and the Avengers and so on. But the most interesting thing for me during those events was seeing those bubble of sociality that were creating automatically at the end of each event. Was like a little networking event inside the other event. And you could literally see people recognizing each other's voices because obviously the avatars are different from, they're not photorealistic, but they were recognizing voices and coming towards the person that they knew and say, hey, hello, how you doing? And meeting each other, bumping into each other in the virtual world. It was so incredible.
And you mentioned a couple words there that I think are really important for people that haven't discovered this yet. It's the coming towards. It's the spatial recognition of being able to go, oh, there's somebody talking in a corner and going and joining a conversation. And I heard a story from one of the guys at Accenture was hosting a meetup once a week. And there were two people that were in the meetup that had never personally met, but they had some connection outside. And they started talking. One of them was looking for a job. The other one needed somebody to hire. And the next day, this is like in the days of COVID, this is like an amazing luxury. But the next day, the one offered the other a job. And it was because the thing that I think we've missed so much from the kind of COVID and lockdown and only kind of 2D screen relationships is you don't have that ability to just talk one-on-one, to connect on a more authentic level, and then have that carry then over into your career or your job.
I think obviously, Katie, then like a lot of work has happened or has had to be put in place over the years to get to this point, because I think everyone's well aware that to get a platform where you can have such cross compatibility and can have these instances that you're describing here takes a lot of work. And I guess a lot of time. I mean, during that period, I guess when you guys transitioned from just being AltsSpace to being Microsoft's AltsSpace, what was that like? And I guess what changes had to happen during that time, to be able to get the product where it is now?
The biggest thing that changed was more probably a lessening of worry or fear about being acquired by such a large company. I think the initial reaction was probably what a lot of startups have. It was, we're going to be chewed up and eaten for parts. Our team is going to be probably disbanded, and we'll see like pieces of AltsSpace maybe ending up in Outlook of the future. But what happened instead was Microsoft or mixed reality told us, you are expert areas in your space, and we're going to trust you to build out what you want your destiny to be, and we're here to support. And then make sure that it is lining up with the mixed reality vision, which is really aligned to what we're trying to do, especially with the announcement of Microsoft Mesh at Ignite, which is the kind of the mixed reality dedication to collaborative tools for other apps. Like, we've become a hero story, and the melding has really been really beautiful. So even though we're a small team within Microsoft, I feel very supported in what we've been trying to do. And our mission, if anything, has more recently has gone back to where we were before we were acquired. Before we were acquired, we were focused on more large scale event production. We had people like Reggie Watts. We partnered with NBC to bring in Steve Kornacki, Chuck Todd, Al Roker, to do larger events and kind of reimagine how kind of 2D television shows or otherwise could be reimagined for virtual reality. But that's a lot of work and a lot of money. And so when we were acquired by Microsoft, we focused more on community events, trying to make sure that anybody could come in and create content, so there was enough of it and a reason to come back and stay. And more recently, we are focusing again on more large scale events. We did this with Burning Man last year. They hosted the Burning Man Festival in Altspace and had over 180 worlds that people could go to, and they had events all week. We had Diplo do a DJ set at that event.
Do you think that was spurred on by COVID?
Oh, of course. I think everything that happened this past year, we were in a place of luxury that our app filled a need during a time of incredible need. And so we saw over the past year tons of people using our product for the first time. And Accenture was interested even before COVID happened, but I think it added urgency there too, to make sure that people felt like they were there together.
And Kati, today our global head of onboarding, Kati Gerti, posted on LinkedIn a tease of this experience that we're going to do with our new joiners. Basically, we're going to onboard them using Altspace. Can you tell us a little bit about how was working with Accenture and how was creating this experience for Altspace, which is very different from the other stuff that you've been doing until now?
Mostly it was very exciting. I think going back to the passion part of this conversation, I met Jason Warnke, who is our first touch point with Accenture. And he was so passionate about this space. And this was maybe the year that we were acquired. And so me being newly part of Microsoft, meeting a representative from Accenture that's trying to solve the problem of collaboration for enterprise, it was just beautiful to sit down and talk to him, because he had so much forward thinking vision for how this could all work. And so over the period of the years, we never lost that contact. And so it became a no-brainer when COVID happened to start to strengthen that partnership and figure out how Accenture, that is trying to solve so many of the same problems that us in mixed reality, could join forces. And so those conversations developed. We announced at Microsoft Ignite, time goes by so fast, I think in March, that we were doing a more solid relationship with Accenture and having them be hero partners in our private preview of what an enterprise version of Altspace could look like. And really, we're defining what the enterprise version of Altspace is based on our conversations with Accenture, because that's such a rich, amazing pipeline of customer feedback. And so hopefully where we end up when we get to public preview, and we're partnering with other companies as well, but Accenture is definitely the ones that have been the most engaged throughout the years, is how do we solve the kind of biggest problems that Accenture has? And the one that I think is really interesting that they came to us to try to solve was new employee onboarding, because we've hired folks in the past couple of months, and they're meeting people on Teams. Like, we're hosting lunches via Teams and hoping to find a way to bring people together. But mostly where we get the most excitement is when we get to meet in Altspace, people feel like they're there. But I think every company is wrestling with, how do we make people feel a part and engaged with each other when we're all remote and working from our living rooms? So Accenture, I think, was like, hey, the most important point where that happens is when you're new to the company, you're coming on, you're going to feel separate and distant. So how could we use this mixed reality platform to make people feel like they're actually there? I love that problem was such a focus.
And you just published the preview of Microsoft Mesh on the HoloLens, and I tried Mesh yesterday for the first time with some of my colleagues, and we were like 4 colleagues around the table spawning 3D objects and placing them on the table, and I could see them in my living room, and that was so incredible, so exciting, and making eye contacts and seeing the lips syncing with their words. What's next for Microsoft? I mean, now you're going to launch Mesh. That's, I believe, it's still on a closed alpha or closed beta at the moment. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, what's the ambition of Microsoft Mesh? If you can give us a little bit of a preview of this platform.
Well, I think you tasted it. So you tried Mesh Home, which is available on HoloLens. That team and our team work very closely together. And the experience is like, okay, if you're either in a room together or not, or in a room separately, you can feel like you're there together. You have avatars. You're able to make eye contact. You're in a HoloLens. So it's very much that story of AR and mixed reality. And then AltSpace is kind of the VR version of that. So now you have a full environment that you can exist in and be able to interact. So the future of that is just it's more of that. It's especially with Mesh, one thing that I love about the Mesh announcement is it's doubling down on trying to do what we did in AltSpace, what you saw in Mesh Home, and bringing that to the entire ecosystem. Like that's the dream, to make it easy for any app to add collaboration, to add avatars, to really make sure that whether I am in AltSpace or I am in Mesh Home, that I can kind of cross that barrier easily and kind of like feel like you're present the entire time. So, and then what you saw at Ignite, if you were able to see that event, that was very much the what is AltSpace kind of take on being a Mesh showcase app. That is like amazing engaged events where you have holoportation. And holoportation is basically the Star Wars dream of somebody on stage that is there as a hologram, both like kind of the kind of billboard effect and also 3D holoportation, which we showed there. The ability for other people to interact, to make eye contact, to talk, and then all the underlying pieces of that to make a collaborative app possible. So that's the dream.
And this is super exciting. And you mentioned holoportation, and obviously I cannot touch that topic right now. I would love to know, how is it going to happen? Are you going to use Kinect Azure? What's the setup for that?
I am excited that you asked, and we're currently discovering that for our more announcements in the future.
All right. Okay. So stay tuned for more information.
So there's a question, I guess, that's going to be on a lot of people's mind, especially when it comes to these online kind of virtual platforms that allow people to collaborate, allow people to meet and do things. And I guess it's on a lot of people's minds because when you look at a lot of other platforms out there, everything from, VR chat through to kind of things like Rec Room, for example, is what's the long-term sustainability / viability of a platform like this? Because obviously, monetization is going to have to play a role in these platforms to be able to make them sustainable, as at the end of the day, they are run by businesses. So I guess what's your take on that and kind of view on that?
Well, I'm excited to announce that we started selling our first tickets yesterday. Burning Man, the festival, announced their ticketing for a variety of different metaverses that'll be participating in Burning Man. And one of those is BRCVR, which is Black Rock City Virtual Reality, that is using AltSpace to host that festival. So now you can go buy a ticket, support both the creators, Burning Man, and us to be able to host an event. So that is, I think, a teaser of what we want to try to enable so that performers and hosts can use our platform to sell tickets, to be able to support their art. I think we really want to be a artist-centric platform so that people find a lot of value out of us as a way to connect with fans, to have an engaging performance and interaction with fans that doesn't take away from the real life concerts. But now you can use AltSpace as like a part of that concert circuit. So it's like, yeah, we're going to be all around the world. And then on May 12th at 7 p.m., everybody put on your headset and now you can go into this environment. And I remember when Fortnite did their first concert with Marshmello, and I talked to a woman at my office and she was just like, yeah, my 13-year-old son, was really excited about the Marshmello concert. And he came to me, he said, "Hey, Mom, I went to my first concert." It's not I logged on to Fortnite and I was in a game. It was I went there, I was present, and that's a 2D experience. And we've heard from people coming to our event that same feeling of I went and I met Reggie Watts. I went and I danced and I made eye contact with Diplo and I waved and I danced my butt off. Like that's, I think, the point that we're getting to.
So I know though platforms like VR Chat as well, they also released a while ago now, like a VR Chat Plus kind of membership and things like that, which had a bit of a turbulent start. But would we ever see anything like that on AltspaceVR, for example?
I think every single app in this world, and I always in this ecosystem, we're all tackling slightly different problems. And I think that anybody that says they're building the metaverse, I always kind of take a second glance at, because we're all building pieces of what we don't know is going to happen next. So VR chat has its place, Rec Room has its place. Altspace really wants to own the area for live events. So any of our monetization strategy and how we want to make sure that we benefit hosts and artists is going to be within that context, within the idea of live events. So no, to your question, we wouldn't look at necessarily the model that VR chat did, but we want to try to answer that question of how do we make it a great place for hosts to share their content.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
Gati, I wanted to ask you a question, the usual Nick provocative question.
Oh yeah, we've made an ongoing go of this now. This is Nick's provocative corner.
Okay, so
I'm ready.
You, as me, are a big fan of Burning Man. I've never been, so I'm probably gonna get in touch later with you to get some tips on all the clothing to buy and the stuff to bring to the playa and so on, because I've always been like postponing my first time at Burning Man, but I think that probably for the next edition, the physical edition, I have to be there, especially after COVID. But I wanted to ask you something. I mean, people at Burning Man created an utopia, a community where everything is shared and everything is possible. And there's a new kind of connection with reality and with people. And I find your passion for Burning Man and your passion for VR very similar on that kind of level. Do you think that VR will be a refuge for all those people that are not fitting in some way, all those people that are different, all those minority you were talking about, LGBT, and people that don't have a voice right now? Do you think that VR will be an important platform for humanity even to evolve in terms of society?
Oh gosh, I certainly hope so. I think that we need to be really careful, people that are part of or leaders within this system, to get too excited that VR is going to solve all our problems or the next AR glasses are going to solve all our problems. We're going to face the exact same things that all other social media companies have run into and other large companies have run into. We're too small to have had to, I think, take that medicine yet. But I'm really hoping that because we've seen what has happened in kind of the other evolutions of virtual realities, i.e. the internet and 2D asynchronous communication, that I hope we take that to heart as we build this kind of next version of the metaverse. So for Altspace, that includes things like really thinking about moderation, really thinking about what are our community standards, what do we want to stand for, and then how do we want to make money, I think is always an important question there too. And so I hope, and one thing that I focus on to your point is if we can be a bastion or a safer space for marginalized communities, and we can build off of that, I think we're more on the right track. And so I'm hoping those two things meld. One, the vision for how the metaverse and VR can better influence the society while also trying to build for the most marginalized or smaller communities. That feels like a good melding. And then your point about Burning Man, I think Burning Man is there's a lot of work there to make it all inclusive and make it an accessible place for a lot of different minorities. So I think, and even they, I think, would be the first to say so. But I'm hopeful with the Burning Man in Altspace that potentially does become a more accessible version of maybe the in-person event. And so you could think about that within any event. It's not about where you live, how much money you have, while these VR headsets and everything needs to drop in price point, it's still more accessible than renting an RV and traveling, and you be traveling across the water to get to a place. So I'm hopeful that we can, as empathetically as possible, design a system that allows people to have more access to things, which again goes back to my earlier statement of us having more access to other people, so that we can also break out of our bubbles, so that we can maybe create an ecosystem that was like the onset of the internet. But what does that look like when you add a layer of presence on top of that? And then how do you kind of build that really empathetically?
And a lot of companies right now are thinking about how to integrate digital into their normal physical events. But I believe that probably the most interesting thing will happen when this kind of integration is not going to be one way, but it's going to be a two-way street. So where the digital attendees will be able to interact with the physical attendees and vice versa. Even you can have, for example, a digital performance that will happen in the physical world and that will be seen by physical people. A sort of a commission between physical and digital with, the realities blurring together between each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you have so many performers that have already discovered that. And we've done a mix of like real life performances streamed into AltSpace, or people in AltSpace, or the people in AltSpace are actually there like in virtual context. It's starting to merge all those worlds. I wonder if we'll talk about it in the future and go, hey, remember that time where you had to like be in a physical place to experience the thing? Ha ha ha. Oh, that's so old. Like, I just wonder if we'll get there.
Do you see then I guess AR playing an integral role in AltSpace's future?
I think we're part of mixed reality, which is at the forefront of the mixed reality ecosystem in general, starting with AR. And so we just get to feed off of all that wisdom and background. And I think we work really closely with the Mesh Home team that you experience, which is an AR version of a really collaboration. And so I think you can expect that all of those are going to play well together. So yes, we see every kind of part of the mixed reality ecosystem as important. But one thing that we try to focus on is, where are people now? And that's one reason that we always focused on the lowest common denominator headset, and why we're focused on making our 2D experience better. So we really want to focus on who has access to this so we can get this in their hands.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, so Nick gets his one proper provocative question. So my question as well is, as we actually look towards I guess making platforms more accessible and getting more people onto these kind of things, and I think that was a great example that you gave in terms of your kind of friend's child saying, I actually went to an event and this was what I got to see, even though it was 2D. It begs the question, as XR becomes a lot more accessible to everyone, and I guess as it becomes integral part of our lives, where everyone owns a phone, everyone has a laptop or one of these devices, and so much so to the sense that even quite young people who are in those early development stages of their life, they need a phone to be able to access this content, just like eventually, I guess, some may argue that they'll need a XR device at some point in the future. How does a platform like AltSpace, kind of look at that for these kind of younger people who will be accessing these platforms? Often under 18, maybe under 16. I can look at that. I know that, for example, Facebook has a policy against under 13-year-olds, but is that ever rarely enforced? Those kind of things. So I guess a lot more people, from my point of view at least, would be looking to get onto AltSpace, and I guess there's a question of how does AltSpace protect that and actually work with that moving forward.
It's a great question, and I think anybody that has a kind of stranger to stranger social app like needs to confront that question. We are a 13 plus app. It has not been proven safe for under 13-year-olds to use the hardware. And separately, also, we want to be an adult community. I think there are many apps out there that are more designed for younger kids to be able to use it and access it. For us, though, we want people to feel like they are able to kind of like be themselves and be in more an adult atmosphere. So we're constantly trying to design the product so that it encourages that. But to your other point too, I think especially with the enterprise aspect, we're always going to be focusing on how to connect and utilize and be a part of the Microsoft really dedication to security, to compliance. And so especially with our work with Accenture, focusing on at least how enterprises, I know you're talking more about kids, but I guess the kids of
well, I guess enterprise.
Accenture.
Yeah, I mean, enterprise can also cross against different areas, because I think, you've got Accenture talking about here, we're training and onboarding, their staff, but also I guess there's going to be a lot of educational institutions looking at this as well as like, hey, can we do our on virtual learning and stuff on a platform like AltspaceVR, for example?
Yeah, and we've had tons of classes and really innovative professors using our platform for classes. So I'm really excited about the EDU use case, especially if we in our enterprise use case can more define AltSpace to just the use case that you want to access. So potentially, like, your new employee members are not going to see everything in AltSpace. They're going to see what Accenture has decided that they have access to. And so you could imagine a similar situation for EDU, so that you could go to a class, really feel present with your other teammates. And I would be really excited to support that.
I wanted to change topic slightly. There's been recently a big event in our community within Accenture where we had our Diamond Global Client Account leads gathering all together from everywhere in the world. And this event usually happens in a physical space, but this year, obviously due to COVID, had to be completely digital. So for this event in Accenture, we decided to send out hundreds of VR devices, and we got the client account leads to join a space, a custom-made space in AltspaceVR. And then I think that we have also some clips that we're going to send in the background. This event has been incredibly successful. We got some feedback from the client account lead saying, wow, this was so incredible. I felt like being there in presence, and I was talking about my children. I've been talking about my golfing with my colleagues, and I felt connected finally. After months and months of staring at a screen, I felt truly there. I mean, is this the future of work?
I think it has the potential to be, especially if we do it right. One of my favorite stories that illustrates that point is one of my first friends that I met in AltSpace was an aid worker. He was from Canada, living in Bangladesh. And there had been a terrorist attack in Bangladesh a couple weeks beforehand. So his whole family had to move back to Canada. So he's alone in Bangladesh. He builds a computer, buys an HTC Vive, and he starts to use AltSpace for all of his social interactions, because he was taking an armored vehicle to work and back. You couldn't go out at dinner. So AltSpace became his main social activity.
Wow.
I was able to go to Canada and give his family Gear VRs so that they could see their dad in VR. And I remember going there, and his daughter Lily puts on a headset, and he had built a virtual room that included a 360 snapshot of her old bedroom in Bangladesh that she was never able to see before she had to run back to Canada. And she looks around and she goes, "There's my stuffed giraffe. There's my magic hat." And then she turns 180 degrees and she sees her father and she goes, "Dad." And her whole face lights up. And I talked to Chris the next day, their dad, and he said, "I have FaceTime, I have like video chat and phone calls, but all of those make me feel far away from my family. But last night, the experience of being in AltSpace, the memory of it, the physical memory of it, was being with my children." And so I think your story illustrates that really well too. It's not that you're kind of making you're making a real version of reality that people actually feel connected to, no matter how simple the experience is. And so when you say, like, is this the future of work? I think if we can make that happen with even at the early stages of where VR is now, of course, I think that the next step is to figure out how to add to that fidelity, add to that experience, and make people feel like they are really there together, because we miss that.
Could we ever see something like AltSpace, a Microsoft product linking in with something like LinkedIn, for example, for that professional link for things?
I mean, I can guarantee you we definitely talked to that team, and there's a lot of ambition across so many Microsoft properties about how to tie into this. So I'm really excited for the next couple of years to find out where the beautiful melding of that is, because Yeah, it definitely seems it's like the next step, I think, is figuring out how mixed reality plays a part in all the different facets of work and play.
Okay.
So something a sort of integration with the Office 365.
I mean, that would be wonderful, and I would love if that happened.
Okay, no, that'd be great. So we've got the future of education, we've got the future of work and entertainment and all of these things. What are the challenges right now that a platform like AltspaceVR is facing that's preventing it, I guess, from reaching the next level?
I think the biggest thing is that we all need to be careful about relying too much on devices. The device adoption is going to take time. Like even you talking about sending out 100 or so VR headsets, that's not something everybody can do yet. And that is where the magic is. The magic is really when you put on the headset and you feel like you're there. But I think that we can capture a good part of that magic in more the 2D version. So the biggest challenge we have is how to make sure that there is an on-ramp for people to discover the magic and whimsy and present inducing feeling of these devices by giving a good on ramp for 2D. That's by far the biggest thing that we're thinking about.
So that's the onboarding experience for new users across 2D and 3D.
Exactly. And making both of those experiences feel great.
Okay. What about, I mean, you mentioned that hardware is a particular challenge, I guess, in this, because it's something we can't, rely on too much. But I guess, is it easy keeping up to date with the different hardware changes and all of these things? I mean, you guys have set out to be a platform that can be cross-compatible. Mm-hmm. So how does that work?
I think if my engineer was in the room, he would definitely be nodding a lot. It's really hard to be cross-platform. It's hard also to make sure that you're keeping up with all of the improvements, all the new pieces of hardware. We work across Oculus Rift, Oculus Quest, HTC Vive, Windows Mixed Reality headsets, 2D on your Mac and PC. Those are a lot of platforms to keep track of. So yes, absolutely. But to your point, that's where we think the magic is. If we can allow as many access points as possible for people to experience each other, that's where the magic's going to be.
Okay, so if we're looking at that, does that mean that something like AltspaceVR has to work towards, like, I guess the lowest spec type hardware, or how does something like that work?
I think that's our goal. Like we don't work on Google Cardboard because that's too far for us to be able to kind of disentangle the product to make work. But when it comes to if we can be on that platform, we're going to try, especially if it's likely to get in the hands of more people. Because we always know that within AltSpace, the more people in the product, it automatically equates to us having more users, people staying longer, their satisfaction being higher. So, and especially the holidays are always an exciting point for us because we can test to see all the things that we've released. We're always seeing the impact, but when it comes to that influx of users at the holiday, then you really see it. You see people staying, coming back time and time again.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
I have a question related to some of your competitors, if I may. There are some platforms that Microsoft kind of, endorsed at the beginning of the mixed reality journey, like, for example, Spatial. There are other platforms like Arthur and other, meetups and meeting and collaboration, XR collaboration platform. But it seems to me that XR collaboration is kind of a moving target. And it's, you need to choose a different platform for all the different use cases. Where is AltspaceVR sweet spot at the moment? Is it more like for meetups and meetings? Is it more for productivity and collaboration? Is it more for is there an ambition to expand this broad this spectrum of use cases?
I am a big fan of narrowing in and doing one thing right rather than everything. Right. And so the thing that we believe that we have a unique value to be able to tackle is live events, especially large scale live events, the feeling of a crowd, a lot of people in a space together, being able to experience a host in a new way, which everything that we've talked about, the onboarding experience is somebody presenting to a large group of people and bringing them along into smaller collaborative sessions so that they can, yes, have that feeling of kind of a small group talking and communicating, and then also being able to see kind of a presentation or an all hands. So that's where we think we have a unique value set. And that's why I go back to there's not going to be one that rules them all. Like there's not going to be, I think, one
Correct.
app that figures out the metaverse, which goes back to, I think, why I get excited about the ambition about Mesh, because it's not about Microsoft owning the apps and experience. It's about giving the possibility for the ecosystem, for other app developers to be able to create these collaborative experiences.
So is it going to be like sort of an underlying framework for collaborative experiences that are going to be built in the future?
I think so.
Okay.
Very exciting.
Well, that brings us on, I guess, to kind of the way that me and Nick like to normally kind of finish, I guess, field of view, which is the future, right? So it'd be interesting to get, because I think every single person that we speak to talks to this in a completely different way. I think, we've had people on the podcast who like to talk about, liking to see an actual metaverse where there isn't like multiple companies and it's just kind of one way to access XR content, through to things like kind of neural interfaces, through to a really great episode actually on the horizon, or actually might be released by now, about kind of using contact lenses for accessing AR content. What is most exciting to you about the future, and I guess what are you looking forward to from different, everything from hardware through to software through to, I guess, your job as well?
I think the thing I'm most excited for is the renewed interest and excitement that other companies and other people have about this space. I feel like Altspace was pretty early on as innovators in this space. And in a lot of ways, we kept trying to figure out how to convince people. And I finally feel like we're at a place where we don't need to convince anybody of anything. Everybody's just ready to go, okay, how do I tie into this? How do I start to play? And that's a really, and that might sound small, but that's a really big deal, I think, for my team, because I think anybody in virtual reality has been kind of waiting for that moment. And so I'm not going to presume to guess what the next 5 years look like, because I think we see that humans are incredibly bad at that. But my hope is that we kind of create this next ecosystem of how people connect, how people work, how people play and experience entertainment. And we do it in a really conscious way, not just for the eyeballs or the clicks, or the chance to kind of make a buck, but for the chance of like really trying to connect people in a way that we couldn't before, that is more accessible than any other platform we've done before. So I definitely, I'm in this because I want to make sure that I have a chance to make this an ecosystem that I want to be a part of, that I can imagine like my community wanting to be in. And so yeah, so that's the thing I care the most about, and really taking advantage of this new lens after COVID, for like a terrible reason, but a good opportunity for people to recognize the gap in the market for remote collaboration, and to offer potentially a solution that meets that needs and delights people using it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks for your answer.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it seems like you've touched on a point where you feel, and I think this is backed up by a lot of Academy members that we speak to as well. And Nick, you might be able to provide some insight from Accenture's point of view, but we're past that client education phase of this is why we want to use VR. And now in that phase where we're using VR, now let's do some cool stuff with it.
Yeah, I think that probably the most important thing about designing for VR is something that a lot of people probably don't think about, which is the strategy and how to scale this in an organic way. So one of the things that we are seeing, especially with a lot of clients that we're working, is that they do some like pilots that remain some glorified POC because they have no strategy on how to apply it to the whole enterprise. And knowing Microsoft and knowing their strategy and knowing their products, I suppose that the ambition for Altspace and the future of their product is to become something that can be used across the whole different parts of the value chain of an enterprise, from design to training, education, but also upskilling the workers to be more productive directly on the job, and eventually for sales and post-sale support and so on. So we're really looking forward to see what Microsoft and Altspace will show us in the next few years.
I cannot wait to show you.
So Katie, just before we kind of end things then, I know that it's really important for you to be able to encourage and bring in quite a diverse community of people into this XR industry. Just for those listening and those interested, but just before we end things, is what advice, tips would you give to those looking to, get into XR and how should they navigate it?
I think the biggest thing is that it's really remembering that this is a brand new industry. And so if you feel like you've missed your chance, absolutely reevaluate that decision. I think there are many ways that you can get involved. And even with Altspace, we try to make it possible for anybody interested in either like working on our team and on the actual product, but just being able to interact with Altspace. You can host an event right now in Altspace without knowing any coding and be able to add your voice to the future of like collaboration and VR by hosting content. And I'm sure there are many other people in the VR industry that have ways for you to participate. And also, this is just an incredibly impassioned community. So you're going to find support. And so I definitely encourage you to look on Facebook groups, get involved, start talking, make some friends, because you'll find a lot of awesome people that want you to be successful as well.
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Well, look, it's been a pleasure, I guess, speaking with you today. I guess around all these different areas, and Nick certainly is exciting to be able to jump in those things. I know, Katie, we've always hosted all of our VR Awards AMA, Ask Me Anything, kind of in Altspace, which is always a delight. Nick's always asking some really thoughtful questions to our guests on there as well, and I guess we've had quite a lot of different people through the doors and over the years now. So and I remember the first time that we spoke was actually first time we did something together was actually at a physical VR Awards, where you came in from Altspace and then we came in from the physical thing, and that's our first exploration into blending realities, I guess. But it's been a pleasure speaking with you today, and yeah.
Well, I think just as a closeout too, is just like major kudos to Accenture for being so forward thinking about wanting to get involved here, doing it right. I've found the most excitement from any company I've talked to within Accenture. So really, kudos to the team.
Thank you from the whole Accenture team. Thank you so much. This is flattering.
Okay, everyone. Well, look, thanks for joining us for this episode of Field of View. You can catch all new episodes on a bi-weekly basis. You can see them on the Field of View landing page on the arxr.org website. You can also find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts. Nick, there's even a few other random ones I've never even heard of that the marketing team and the producer let me know that we're on. So I don't think there's a place where you can't find us. So feel free to have a watch, have a listen, and catch us next time.
Sure, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more episodes, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for a new episode of Field of View. Thank you so much, Katie, for being with us, for being such a great guest, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.
Through accessible insights, a solid network of support, and recognizing truly outstanding achievements near or far. Big or small, we're in this together. AIXR.